Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Borough of Crafton Council meeting dated March 9th, 2020. Call to order. Flag salute, Vice President.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ayla.
Here.
Mr. Amendola.
Here.
Mr. Kraus.
Here.
Mr. Crown.
Here.
Mr. Lavasky.
Here.
Ms. Perry.
Here.
Mr. Sala.
Here.
Mayor Bloom.
Here.
Solicitor Corbel.
Here.
Mr. Engineer Minster.
Here.
I am here. Mr. Kazarowski is not available tonight. You have a form.
Thank you. Approval of the bill list dated March 9th, 2020.
So moved.
Second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Bill is approved. Approval of the minutes dated February 24th, 2020.
So moved. Second.
I do have one minor question. I think by last meeting, our borough manager was the borough manager and not the intern, as referenced in the meeting minutes? Oh, you weren't?
No, the appointment was effective March 1st. The meeting was in February.
Oh, okay, thank you. I can't count.
That's right. Because, and on that note, Mr. Ayla actually signed the agreement for the MOE.
All right.
As the president was out of
So,
town.
county. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Thank you. Approval of the minutes. Moving forward, citizen comments. So please sign in for the agenda section at the beginning of the meeting and non-agenda section at the end of the meeting. Do we have anybody signing in for citizen comments?
Sorry.
No one signed.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, if in the event a motion happens on the floor that's not posted on the agenda, either in this meeting or in our regular business agenda meeting, you have the right to be heard, and you don't have to have them signed up on the sheet if something spontaneously comes up on the floor that's not on the agenda there with regards to motions. All right? Yes.
Point of clarification, that is for motions, not just discussion items?
Correct. Mr. Corbel? Is that correct?
Yes, so you're only required if there's a motion on the table to allow public comment if it is not on the agenda.
All right, just want to make that clear to everybody. So it's very important, if you have questions about something on the agenda, or if you just have questions about something ongoing or something new business related, please just sign up for the citizens' comments. All right, so seeing no citizen comments at this point, I'm going to move forward to the President's report. On Friday, Crafton Borough was recognized by the Allegheny League of Municipalities and the County Executive's Office for its participation in the Banner Community Program, and this is the second year of recognition being part of that. Moving forward, we have we're going to be planning our community cleanup day. Managers looking at me. So for the past few years, we've been setting up a dumpster with waste management. Given the current circumstance, you're going to have to be leading the charge on that. I'm going to be working with you to pick a date. We're going to look at the previous dates. If anybody has a suggestion, I believe we did the past couple years in April. If somebody thinks it should be in May, just let us know, but usually Waste Management gives us a very decent
We're already started the process with the state organization. We're looking at April 25th, but with Mary and
Awesome.
I just didn't want to put it on there because it's not finalized
Yeah.
yet, but the process has been started.
Yeah, I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that, you know, if you have something larger, you know, we're gonna have the dumpster down there again, don't worry, all right? And then the manager's working with the Shade Tree Commission on the 2020 Shade Tree Program. This is the first year where we're actually gonna have a formal pruning and tree removal program. Council approved that in the budget last year. We have about $60K in that fund. The manager and the public works team are going to be working with Shade Tree and figure out how they're going to get that out. So that's something that's in process, will be ongoing. More details will be out there. We had a tree inventory done last fall, and you know, if there is something of concern relating to a public shade tree, a tree that you believe is the Borough of Crafton's responsibility, just submit a ticket online through the portal or send us an email, and we will see if it was on the list, and if it's not, we'll have you evaluated. But I just want to make sure everybody knows we're active in this field, and we're going to be moving forward with that this year. So moving forward to the mayor's report.
Good evening. Just like to take a moment to pass along to the community that Fire Assistant Chief Dave Crafton from Crafton Volunteer Fire Department was a member 30 years. He was also part of our Public Works Department for a lot of years, both full-time and part-time for a while. And he finished his career in Crafton as a crossing guard at Bradford Noble. He was known by all the kids, people with dogs and everything. And Dave was a giver, and he got along with everybody in the community, and people would stop to see him. He's a dedicated man and a family man, and he gave all the time. So I would just like to take a moment and have a moment of silence for the passing of Assistant Chief Dave Crafton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, move forward with the engineer's report. Engineer Misterman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to report on a couple items. One, thought I'd just give you a brief summary of the activities on the separation projects. So first is the Crafton Boulevard, and these are all the GROW grants that we have that we're working on, either submitted an application, already received an application, or submitting a letter of interest in. First is Crafton Boulevard. We finalized the layout and sizing of the storm pipe collection and underground storage tank system. Currently, we're working on preparing the site plans for the proposed parking area for submittal to the city. We're looking at a pre-application meeting is scheduled for the city zoning folks next Wednesday. We'll present the project and before making a formal application, just letting them know what we're working on. After city zoning, we'll set up a meeting with PWSA and the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, otherwise known as DOMI, to review the overall project. After these meetings, then we'll have a clear understanding of what the actual permitting process will be. But right now, we'll need that meeting with the city to get more clear on their requirements. Next is the Grandview Avenue GROW grant. The bid docs are complete, so we're looking to coordinate with the manager on getting the advertising together and submitting that advertisement to solicit bids to begin construction on that work. Next is the Perrine Street GROW grant. We've prepared a refined concept. It's a rough concept. We've got some details together on refining that concept and providing stormwater detention and control. That is part of the requirement for flow that's discharging to streams, is that it's taking it out of the storm sewer system, that being stormwater, and discharging it directly to local streams. We're implementing control devices like we did on Crafton Boulevard to ensure that there is no additional contribution to flooding or the degradation of downstreams. So haven't done any survey on that. What we're looking to do is, with the manager, go and meet the affected property owner and just to explain the project to them and give them the courtesy of what's being planned. Next is Woodlawn and Fountain Road Grant. We did an existing condition survey of the area, which means going out and locating all the roads, sidewalks, inlets, utilities, shutoffs, any surface features that would be impacted by design on that project. So that is complete. We're in the process of refining the drainage areas and further developing the modeling for the stormwater collection system, and then the sizing in the stormwater detention facilities prior to discharging to Bell's Run. That one in particular goes to Bell's Run. Next is Broadhead and the Busway Grow Grant. We've done the field survey work. That's been completed. In the process now of performing the office work to finalize that survey, so we bring that survey information in. There's a lot of reduction of the survey data to create a map, a resulting map, and then we'll begin to continue to refine the concepts for that project as well. Emerson Avenue Grow Grants next. We have prepared a final concept, a refined concept, providing stormwater detention control for that discharge as well. No survey yet has been performed, as once again we'll be meeting, we'd like to meet with the property owner to explain the project and just as a courtesy to get them involved and updated as to what's being planned. So lastly is the 2019 road program. We've reached out to Melee, the contractor who by the time they got to the municipality last year, it was too late. We asked them to hold on the paving. All of the prep work is done. Sidewalks and ADA ramps are installed. So now it's a matter of just coming in and milling and paving. They had agreed that they will be here. Crafton's first on the list. But once again, we've heard stories like that before. So we're going to keep them on a short list, a leash, and if for some reason, things aren't going the way we hope or planned, we're certainly not going to get into a similar situation as last year. We'll request to engage the solicitor in some activity to encourage them to get here. They're well beyond, obviously, the completion date, and they are in breach of the contract. So we do have some means and measures to force the contractor if necessary, although that didn't seem like the attitude out of the gate with these guys. So we'll keep you updated. It's still a little early. Treatment or asphalt plants are still closed, but they'll be opening soon once there's a continued projection of 50 degree and above type temperatures. And that's all I have.
Question for you. With regards to anticipation, do you think it would be April or early May to wrap up 2019?
I think so, yes. That's reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
question, solicitor? I'm sorry, the engineer. In your report on the grow grants, could you do two things to clarify? I believe it's the first two that you recounted are for grants that we already have won, and that the other work that you described is for the design work that we authorized recently for applying for the grants this cycle. So I just wanted to make sure that the community was clear on what you were reporting on, and so if you just check me on those facts.
That's correct. The first two are projects that we do have approval for, and the remaining projects are as a result of the work authorizations that you had approved recently to either prepare the grant applications, which is either 60% or 90% of design. Those are going to be due in June of this year. And there are two projects that are too large and aren't far enough along to put into this cycle. So those projects will just get preliminary design, better costing, and they'll be ready for the next year's cycle about this time, June of next year, we'll submit those two projects. Just as a result of not having enough time between now and June to do a 90% completion.
So you mentioned permitting at the city for the Crafton Boulevard. Can you remind us what that is about and what we're gonna, I know you said you have to determine what the process is gonna be, but what is the, what sort of permitting, what are we needing to be permitted to do?
Yes, when you discharge water to or through the city, there's a specific permit that they ask you to get, so that they understand what you're doing, what you're discharging, where you're discharging it to, so that they can protect their structures and streams. So that's essentially it. There is also, and I don't remember the names of the permit, but there's also a permit that when you work in the city, or a pipe is being excavated and installed on city proper, within the city limits, even though it might be on private property, they still also request an understanding of the project and an approval from them to do the work in the city, even if it is not their property.
Right. And in this case, like, if I remember correctly, the Crafton Boulevard project, there are going to be some significant water retention tanks
Yes,
installed, and the target is to be releasing after the wet water events,
yes,
so that
exactly.
we're not adding to the flow.
Great point. As a matter of fact, this project is actually reducing the peak flows to Bell's Run as a result of what water was actually going there. Now that the water is being controlled, even though water is coming from a different area, that water is being held back, and there's actually a reduction all the way through the 100-year storm of the water being discharged on the peak rate being discharged to Bell's Run. So yeah, this project is a benefit to Bell's Run.
All right, thank
Not
you very much
a
for the
return.
clarification.
Yeah, great points, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving forward to the solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Quickly, with respect to the non-tower wireless ordinance, this is in relation to the anticipated build-out of the 5G wireless infrastructure. I should have a draft ordinance prepared for the borough review in April. One of my other communities took the plunge on this before you all did, and we've been working on that, so you will be the benefit of the fruits of those labors with a reduced bill for that ordinance preparation, since we're already doing it. It will come in two parts. There will be a zoning amendment, but there will also be an ordinance that regulates rights-of-way under our streets and sidewalk ordinance. So look for that soon. As soon as it's ready, I will email it to council for review, which would be, I'm anticipating, in advance of the April discussion meeting. I'll skip over the next point because I'm going to be asking for a motion there. With respect to the library lease, I was asked to provide an update, and my update is that the library, as we left it, they were to contact me and make comments on the draft lease that we provided. As of today, no contact from the library attorney. Secondly, this is not on the agenda, but I wanted to report to council at last month, I guess on the 24th, the meeting on February 24th, we had a resident make comments about a lawsuit that was filed. I wanted to report to council that according to my recommendation at the meeting, the lawsuit was withdrawn, and it was withdrawn the next day on February 25th. So there's no need to concern yourselves about that any longer. And then lastly, with the approval of the collective bargaining agreement with the police union, council has to amend our pension ordinance for our uniformed our uniform pension plan for our police officers to include the drop pension option. And so I was asking for a motion tonight to authorize me to prepare and advertise the drop ordinance. If anybody's interested in doing that. Or you can wait for 2 weeks, it's up to you.
I'll make said motion to authorize the solicitor to advertise an ordinance. Is it to advertise, I'm sorry, my apologies, advertise or to direct it? Advertise.
Yeah,
Okay,
It's
to
all right.
advertise the ordinance to add the drop program language to our uniformed pension ordinance.
Second.
Right, questions, comments? Do we understand why we're doing this? Public comment? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, Solicitor.
That's
Thank
the
you,
end of my
Mark.
report, thank you.
All right. Manager report.
Mr. President, the 2020 road program, the streets have been given to the engineer. The bid specs are out there. Bid openings are due next week, Tuesday of next week. So we'll see what comes in. I probably would believe that the contractor from last year will be one of our bidders because they're going to be hopefully in town at the same time, but we'll see what happens on that. So until the bids come in, there's really not much to report on that end. Oregon area was part of what we were looking at, and that's going to be something we will be discussing with the utility companies once they clear out of there, but that's not going to be for about 3 months. So that's where we're at on the road program. Grant updates, I think the borough engineer gave a very good rendition of where we're at on the road grants. On the Green Light Go grants, the preliminary markings for the poles have been made. Site work, some site work has been done, especially on the ADA ramps, etc. They're going to move as quickly as they can, but again, we're behind the 8 ball there until they give us a day or they get a date that they can actually procure poles to put the lights on. So they can do a bit of work, but they really can't do the majority of the work until they have the poles in hand, or else we're just going to have mud pits everywhere and trip hazards. Plan Commission had requested, and it has been done, to send a letter to those that had submitted RFPs from the rezoning RFP, to ask them, they had a joint meeting with Ingram Borough, to ask them to give them a ballpark number for 1, an overlay district in the Crafton Ingram Shopping Center, and 2, a standalone bid for Ingram for a rezoning of that borough. That was actually more of a favor thing, but the 2 of them have already gotten back to me asking questions and clarifications, but these are just ballpark numbers for the Planning Commission to consider. It's not really an action item, but just something so that everybody knew what the cost may be, and what Crafton Borough will do after Ingram makes a decision whether they want to spend the money.
Okay.
At the last meeting, the library board promised they would give me a list of things that they needed done, and they did. Many of them are small items, and we're correcting them as we speak, from changing locks to painting the hallway and things like that, whatever. We're getting estimates right now on the replacement of the roof above the children's section. And that'll be, the first estimate I got back is going to require us to bid that one out. It's a costly item, well above the threshold of what we're allowed not to do, not to have a bid. I've gotten some estimates back on replacing carpeting, etc., in this building and in the library and the magistrate's office. We repaired some doors and put metal doors in the magistrate's office so people can't just come in through the back door, especially people with handcuffs on, etc. So we have made some repairs. Most of them, again, are minor, but the major ones are going to be costly. And once we get those estimates back and get a few that make sense, I can give council some ballpark numbers, and you then can decide how we need to proceed.
All right. Anybody have any questions for the manager while we're here?
I just had a quick question in regard to Linwood Park.
Yes.
Just if we can get a quick update in regards to Linwood Park and also what it looks like against some of the other parks as well.
Mhm. I went down there this morning after the complaint came in, and it was a very legitimate complaint. We probably took a truckload of dirt off the sidewalk and mud and off the steps. I have pictures here, and I think I sent them to council right before I went out to dinner. They cleaned it up very well and put down a barrier. I showed it to the engineer, at least to divert the water coming down there out into the sewer, into the street. It's a temporary fix, to say the least. We closed off that entrance because there's a bad step there that needs to be repaired, and I wasn't comfortable with people walking up those steps. So we've abated the complaint. I'll be working with Rick to take a look at it and see where this water's coming from. Until we figure that out, the situation's gonna persist. But we'll be keeping an eye on it, making sure that that mud doesn't boil up like it did before.
I saw that you put some silt socks down.
We did, and that's for the diversion of the water coming down.
Okay. Thank you for making quick work of that.
Mr. President, if I may ask a question. It sounds like, I mean, there's a history or some type of, this isn't an one-off incident. Mr. Manager, do we have any idea how long this has been happening with these stairs? And
In a very brief conversation with the Public Works Director, a long time, but it's the first one for me.
Okay. Well, it looks like you guys will be making some recommendations and we'll have some corrective actions long term.
I had them get out there first thing in the morning, they got out there and they did what they needed to do, in my opinion.
Well, process works, thank you. All right, so we're gonna move on to our discussion item section. So just so we know, when we're going through this, you'll see the individual from council that proposed the discussion item. And so with that, first item is social media policy, and that's gonna be led by Vice President Hale.
Thank you. So I wanted to bring this up because we already have something that our solicitor had prepared for us in the form of a resolution. It's something that we started discussing, but it kind of fell to the wayside as just general council business kind of happened. And it's something I wanted to try and pick back up because, especially after learning that Chief Sumter had instituted a social media policy in the police department, I thought that if it's good enough for our police, then I think it's something that we should look at for all of the borough employees. I know our solicitor had indicated that he was open to having more detailed discussion, but it really seemed like no one took him up on that. So, I mean, I wanted to see what everyone else's thoughts were on it, and if, I guess there's no other discussion, possibly move it to our voting meeting to vote on.
So, does council want to continue evaluating and making comment on the document in a work group with Mr. Aiello, or can we move forward? Any comments?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So is this going to be something that's going to cover council members, the borough as an entity, and the borough employees?
Well, yeah, I believe our solicitor might be able to speak to that better.
Yeah. This is directed in large part towards the employee use of social media. It does not apply to members of Borough Council. That's what I'm recalling. My strong recommendation is that council appoint a small group, 2 or 3 members, that can work this with me to ensure it includes everything that you want it to. I prepared this from policy that's implemented in another community that we represent, but I put it together as this is something that you could consider, but it doesn't take into account everything that you may or may not want to include. So that's why I'm suggesting that you have a working group to work this and then bring it to council for discussion. Not to vote on it the next meeting. I don't believe that this is ready for that.
I am amenable to that. I just wanted to kind of jumpstart the conversation since it seemed like it was something that was requested by, I believe, former Councilmember Valchef, and kind of moved on through the last year and kind of made a sluggish entry into this year. So I'm completely open to a working group to work with the solicitor.
All right, should we just pick a couple people, or?
I'd ask for volunteers.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Obviously, I would volunteer.
All right, so with the work group, we'll have Mr. Alo. Can I get a couple other volunteers here? Right? Dave?
I'm out of the country, for probably about 6 weeks.
Okay, all right. Anybody else? I guess Brad, all right. Mr. Kraus?
We have our manager from that working group.
I think so. All right. And, all right, so we got Manager McKibben. So I think the three of you can handle that and bring it back to us.
Great. Thanks.
All right.
That's all I have.
Okay. All right, moving forward, non-discrimination ordinance, establishment of a work group. And I believe actually before the meeting, Ms. Saba, you mentioned maybe putting it out as actually like a community workshop, so you can take the conversation forward on this item.
So I know the non-discrimination ordinance, this was brought up by Mr. Cindric at the end of last year, so this is something that I feel would be great to have a group come together, because there are, diving into this more, there's a couple of different options of what we can do with an ordinance. I know Solicitor Coral provided some, and there's other organizations throughout the state that have provided other drafts as well. So I would like to form a work group, ideally involving possibly some residents as well, to kind of get feedback to make sure that any ordinance that we adopt is fully inclusive of all members of our community.
Okay, so do you want to pick a date on the calendar and then we can move forward with advertising? Or can we, do we need to advertise? How do we go about doing this if it's a workshop?
Well, I mean, you want to make sure that the public knows, and if there's going to be a majority of council present, then it should absolutely be advertised in the local newspaper. That's really, I don't have enough details to know exactly whether or not you must advertise.
I mean, to be safer, I mean, just to
just
advertise it, put it on Savvy Citizen. So you want to pick a date and then propose that, and then we can vote on it at the next, do we have to vote on it, or can we coordinate with the manager and get it advertised?
Yeah, and I would suggest that if there are multiple ordinances or approaches, that the materials related to each be made available in advance so that the meeting is productive. And I'd be happy to look at any of those alternates as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair.
A comment. As you're working on this, would you please be sure to look at where any of the items in the proposed ordinance are duplicative of legislation, ordinances, state laws that are already in effect? Because I know that Chief Sumter mentioned to me when we were talking about it some time ago that there, in a number of these that are coming up, they're duplicative of existing or slightly different and could cause some confusion. So I would highly recommend that we have appropriate review.
Certainly, and this is a big portion of why I'm asking for a work group, because there are other municipalities within Allegheny County, because Allegheny County does have some language within their code as well, but there's other boroughs that have adopted or working on adopting ordinances. So something that goes hand in hand, and that's why we're pushing this to a work group, because there was no ordinance that we could pass right away without having any conflicts. So we want to make sure that, unfortunately, the state, there are some protections that are not included on the state level that we would like to see included on the local level as well. Fortunately, right now, there are no boroughs in the state of Pennsylvania that have a non-discrimination ordinance, but there are ones who are working towards it. There are townships who have passed that we are working as models with, us as well as Etna Borough, so kind of bouncing ideas off. So I'd love to get more community involvement as well, and other council members.
I mean, I think the more eyes we get on this, the more that people can provide feedback, possibly rip it to shreds, to then build it back up into something even stronger. I mean, because at the end of the day, I think the goal of this ordinance is to show the Western Pennsylvania, show Pittsburgh, show possibly the world that Crafton is an open and an accepting place.
Thank you. So, Mr. Salvi, you'll lead the effort here. Does anybody else want to help out with the meeting? I recommend.
I'm definitely good.
All right, Mr. Aguilar. Anybody else?
Depending on the meeting times, I'll try and finish as well.
Okay.
So I'm looking at, I would say potentially the last week of the month, because that'll be right after our next meeting, and that would give us this meeting as well as advertising it as per discussion in the next meeting to bring up some volunteers and some other community involvement. So what day of the week typically is best? I know there's other meetings that occur. So I'm looking at either the 24th or 25th.
So the 24th is when Planning Commission meets, and that's at 7. I mean, you could meet at 6, and maybe some of those people would stay to hang out with the Planning Commission. So somebody have a, maybe more than an hour. So how early can you meet? Because their meeting starts at 7.
I would say ideally it would be 6:30, so there's enough time for people to come to get home from work.
So the other date you recommended was,
25th.
okay, to 25th at 6:30? Are you, can you do it?
No, I'm trying to leave.
What day are you leaving?
I'm leaving the 25th and we'll be gone until
Can we do it the week, can we do it next week?
The 18th?
Mr. Andrew, do we have enough time to?
Don't try and accommodate me, because I have to look at my schedule, it's pretty full. So pick the date, and if I can attend, I will.
If it needs to be advertised, we need at least a 2-week notice, at least.
So I would say the 25th. And then Councilwoman Perry, if there are items that you would like addressed, if you could, just let us all know. And yep.
So 3/25, Wednesday the 25th. All right, at 6:30?
Correct.
All right, and you guys will go ahead and make sure it gets on Savvy and advertised in the paper. Okay. All right. Anything else on this subject?
At this time,
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Didn't we decide last year that we were moving forward with this and that you were gonna start to work on that? Are you gonna be here for these meetings?
I'm not available on the 25th, I have a meeting in Forest Hills, but I can send somebody from my office to Borough. I did prepare a draft ordinance for the borough to consider that I sent around back in January, second or third week of January. And that's one that's based on Mount Lebanon and Ross Township. And so I understand that Etna is drafting something slightly different, and I understand that's what Mr. Saba and Mr. Alo are attempting to do here to try and address some concerns that have been raised. So I feel I've checked the box on what I was asked to do, and I'm happy to send somebody from my office to the meeting on the 20th.
Just for a point of clarification, that document is in the 127 meeting
Yeah, that sounds about
folder,
right, yeah.
on our drive.
I sent it to everybody if I
Right.
remember, or I sent it to Russ and asked him to send it.
Right.
But if you
Yeah, I
don't
know
want
that-
anybody to come, that's fine. I mean, it would be an hourly charge, it wouldn't be part of the retainer for me coming to both of these meetings. So it would be hourly for my office to go. Totally up to you.
Well, it would seem to me that, if there's a meeting, that somebody should be here from the office, as opposed to people giving their input and then it, third party.
Mr.
Oh,
President?
yeah.
If I may make a
Mr. Aiello.
If I may make a suggestion, maybe if we could ask our manager to attend and possibly take notes of concerns to be able to then relay it back to our solicitor as an alternative.
Yeah.
That'll work.
I think that's a fine idea. Mr.
I'll
McKibben,
I'll add that to my meeting list.
are you okay with that?
I said ask.
So
I know, are you okay? Have you-
I'm having fun. Right now, off the top of my head, it looks fine, so Wednesday at 6:30. If I can't make it work, I'll let you know, but I should be able to.
Yeah, if not, just communicate with the solicitor's office.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll cover the basis. All right. Gonna slide down the discussion topic list here. Enforcement of ordinance 1654, business and multifamily inspections. Mr. Crown?
Yeah, this is something that's been going on. Last January, I believe, council approved ordinance 1654 to do fire inspections on the businesses and multifamily, more than 3-unit properties in the borough. It had a date of August in order to start the enforcement. We're 6-8 months past that date. This is trying to push it along to come up with some policies, a fee schedule, and some other materials to push this program to the finish line.
So if I recall, excuse me.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, the ordinance has an alternate year multifamily versus business schedule. And some email that's gone back and forth is that we have well over 300 rental units, actual properties, with a total of over 1,000 units that we know of at this point. And the point was made that that is a significant amount of inspection. So I don't believe that we said which year was going to be which. And so it seems to me that it's going to take some time to figure out both the cost and how we're going to cover that, and who can do that much in what period of time and when that needs to be starting. So, I would think that we should be looking at business inspections first. I don't know if we have a tally other than the tax rolls, but it seems that would make sense to me, that we would start to look at how can we do the business ones.
If I could chime in, there was a preliminary provision in both the business and the multifamily for registration, but then both default to a second level, which for businesses, beginning January 1, 2021, good for 2 years. Right, and then multifamilies beginning January 1, 2022, for 2 years. So if you could ramp this up to be started in it by next January, then you can just pick up and move from there.
And the one, we've already missed one cycle yet.
Yeah, so there's these preliminary cycles that we put in here that were just if we could get up and running, but then the most important sections are the ones that start 2021 and 2022. So I think if council works diligently, there's no reason you couldn't be ready to go next January on the business and the business inspection.
Right, and those 300 and some units, If you look at those, some of those are 1 unit or 2 units, these are 3 or more units.
Right.
So we'd have to break some of those down, there's a lot of
Right,
the
and then-
duplex in there.
Mhm.
So instead of 300 or over 1,000 units, it'd probably be about half once you go with 3 or more units
Still one.
into the
Yeah,
mix.
I didn't,
Mr. President, I actually have a question in regards to that, to the ordinance. So, just a little clarification between business and residential. So with rental units, with apartments, what's being classified as business versus residential when it comes to inspections?
It's defined in the ordinance.
Okay.
So businesses would be any business, a residential would be 3 or more units. So if you have an apartment building with 3 or more units, that would be your residential unit, subject to the residential inspection. So 1 unit, 2 units, no inspection, 3 or more units, there would be an inspection.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving forward, what resources do we need?
I would like to see maybe if, again, dump on Russ's plate, but when he was at Dormont, I believe, Russ, you had a pretty good extensive program in the inspections. So maybe we can use his knowledge to work with Dormont and look at some fee schedules and some information materials that they may be able to pass on. And he could work with the borough's fire marshal, Andrew Beardmore and Dave Morgan, to try to formulate a plan, at least get some inspections done this year, preliminary inspections, so they can get all the kinks worked out, so they can totally ramp up for, January 1, 2020.
are these fire inspections or are they building inspections?
The ordinance,
They're a little more broad than fire, but they do include a fire aspect.
So what they do also include the building code, is that correct?
Yes, this is the registration that I'm looking at, and the inspections shall be for fire code, construction, property maintenance, so it has everything that
Thing
we
wrapped
look
up
at.
into
Yeah.
it. So it's
But fire is
really a
definitely part.
multiple phase.
Correct.
Multi-phase. And so we talk about registration, and I think that there's, some pie in the sky idea that because there's an ordinance out there, that people are just going to register. And it seems to me that we are going to have to use all of our resources and create a program that lets people know and gives them the forms and gives them dates.
If I may.
Yeah.
Somebody made the point, and I have to agree 100%. The real priority right now, and will have to be, is the business inspection. Right now, we have 0. And we can find out who they are pretty quickly. We just have to look at the market top that and delineate who those people are. Down the road, residential, we're gonna have to work, and we are doing residential inspections now. But we're not necessarily doing fire inspection in the residential inspection.
And this is for rentals, for clarification.
Right, for multi-unit buildings.
Right, and then for clarification for the public, when there's transfer of ownership, there's an inspection done there.
There's a building inspection done, but not necessarily, and not a fire inspection.
Right.
I mean, some of these need to be a lot of these businesses need to be sprinkled. There's a lot of egress issues and stuff like that that are put into the fire code. So, using the Dormont example, the priority has, and it still is doing the businesses. And they're only halfway done, and they've been doing it for a while. It's not an easy process, so it's not gonna happen overnight, but I would recommend that that's where the businesses is where we start, especially in the fire inspection mode. Having safe valves, having working sprinklers, having fire extinguishers where they need to be, et cetera, because that's not being done right now.
I have a question. Since Mr. Corbel stated that the ordinance is broad and it encompasses not just fire, but also building inspection and property maintenance. Ostensibly, we're already doing those aspects of it, correct? I mean, we have Susan, she goes around and she does a part of that, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your last one.
We have Susan, who's doing the,
Susan has no inspection powers, no.
No, season, she's
I said season, right?
She does code
She
enforcement.
does code
which
enforcement.
is in the ordinance.
It does say property maintenance code, so she
Which
is,
She can,
but that's
So-
usually exterior,
that is exactly right.
not interior.
So,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, so it seems like we're gonna end up having to have a three-pronged approach, to have an inspection that is geared towards the building code and maintenance, and then separate fire, as opposed to trying to roll it all into one thing.
And since we do contract those services out, the inspection part of it, you know, there is that aspect that the council has to determine how they want that to be done. Internally, hiring people, or continue to use BIU. That's a major issue.
Mr. Allen?
And I was just gonna ask with respect to the contracting out portion with respect to BIU, it's my understanding that they're not here full-time, that they have 1 or 2 days a week that they're here?
Currently,
So what are the mechanics? I mean, so we understand what we have to do. Now we have to figure out how to do it, when to do it, and,
Figure that out
no.
tonight.
But that's, we need some proposals. So, Mr. Crown, are you gonna propose some things to council? What's the path
I'll
forward
work
look like?
with the manager and see if we can come up with, you know, multi-pronged approach to meet the ordinance and to do the inspections prior to January 1st, 2021.
Yeah. I would just ask, you know, from our prior conversations in years past, you know, I understand that the fire department has an inspection system, like a software platform, correct?
That's correct.
And then we acquired Tracer, which is an asset management system. So I haven't had like a, you know, deep dive on that piece of software, but one of my reservations in anything that we do is that, you know, whoever does it digitally, so the administrative burden becomes less, and that the data becomes workable, and we're not spending a lot of time in-house shuffling paper, you know, in
or
2020.
duplicating digital entry.
Yes.
Mr. President, would it make sense, Mr. Crown, would it make sense to form like a work group with maybe 2 or 3 council members to tackle this?
Well, yeah, I think that would be reasonable. I think that, like I said, the manager's resources, you're gonna need the fire department, or the fire marshal, not the fire department, the fire marshal's resources, possibly the code enforcement, and, you know, all those resources coming in and trying to put together a plan to conquer, you know, what's in the ordinance.
So would it be fair to bring in Susan and
Andrew?
Andrew and yourself and us to?
Yeah, I think that would be the first step, and I think multiple conversations over the next few months to try to put it all together and look at other communities and how they solve the same situation and the same ordinance, similar ordinances to come up with a plan.
So-
I'd like to be involved with that as well.
All right, so would it be fair to say by, you know, give us some like milestones here, something to work towards, that by the June 9th, that we have a working plan, this work group puts together a working plan, and that we can take action on it? And if that's too far, maybe in May, but I want to give you guys enough time.
I think that it would be good to try to get it done by July 1st, at least a plan
Okay.
by July 1st, something to begin a slow implementation to work out the kinks, the software programs, you know, all those types of things, contacts of residents, standard letters, all those types of things to go along with that, so that we shoot for a January 1 rollout date.
So, but it would seem to me that maybe just doing status updates for May, June, and July would get it
Okay, so our meeting, the July 13th would be our first meeting.
That's fine.
Right, but the idea would be to have an update
Yeah,
at our discussion meeting, each meeting.
right. Okay, so at the beginning of every month, we'll have a status update, and we'll hopefully have our plan, ready to adopt by July, that meeting, that first meeting in July. Okay, so just keep us apprised of what resources we need. Okay, so just to make sure I got the right people down here, so you've got fire marshal, code enforcement officer, the manager, Mr. Crown, Ms. Perry. Anybody else? All
I
right,
think if we do any more, it might be too many cooks in the kitchen.
yeah, all right, so I think you guys have a good team there, so thank you very much. May I move forward? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Blighted properties update, Mr. Kraus.
I just have a question really, and then if we want to discuss, we can, but to Manager McKibben, do you have any update as to where we're at in the process with the blighted properties on Baldwin and Bar Avenues? To your knowledge, I understand that, you may not be totally up to speed, but,
Well, Bar was scheduled and then it was pulling off the agenda, so I don't know what council wants to do with it. It was scheduled for demolition.
So, may I speak to that? The question is, can we put that up for sheriff's sale to see if it can be brought back into productive life?
I play an attorney on TV, but I'm gonna have to defer to the solicitor.
I mean, you could ask anything to be up for sheriff's sale. I believe that property is delinquent, and usually we ask Jordan or work with the school district to have those placed on the sheriff's sale. So if that's council's desire, if it's a phone call, quite frankly, to make that happen to Jordan. I'm pretty sure this is 1528, Brian?
Either 1428 or 1528, that's right.
It's
I'm pretty sure it's delinquent.
a substantial building, if somebody would like to take it on as a rehab project, at least give somebody a chance to try to bring it back to productive life, because it's a big building.
That's up to council. I mean, whatever y'all want to do, we can make it happen.
As far as Baldwick, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. That's all I can say about it. It is totally delinquent. I can tell you the owner that we have on record just sold his home in Mount Lebanon for $279,000 on Vermont Avenue. So he is alive and well. He just doesn't care.
Are you talking about the one with the collapsed front?
It collapsed everything.
It's already been condemned and is, for
We have a
demo,
lot-
all I think we want to do is bid it.
We have a lot of condemned buildings if you want to tear them down, if you want to give them a shot and take the sheriff's sale, to the solicitor's point. Contact Jordan and give it a shot.
Well,
Maybe
what's
maybe
the
somebody will
update?
bid on it.
Right, what's the update on
Baldwin.
96?
I
No.
can tear down Baldwin.
Yeah, Baldwin needs to be torn down. I guess my larger point I'm trying to get to is, do we have any criteria as to what we want to use as a benchmark for something like a sheriff's sale? Because it's in the eye of the beholder, vis-a-vis what we already know is going to be knocked down, i.e. Baldwin.
I mean, there are fees involved with taking it to sheriff's sale. You're gonna pay Jordan, you're gonna pay for the legal ads, that kind of thing, which they hope to recoup through the sheriff's sale process. But if it doesn't sell, they're gonna ask you to pay it. I mean, typically, if you think somebody wants it, then it makes sense to go out to sheriff's sale. If you go out to sheriff's sale without knowing if someone is interested, it's a shot in the dark, so you don't know what you're gonna get out of that. And then the demo option, like on Baldwick, I know we've had this conversation at council before on multiple occasions. It is ready for demo, but I think that there was information or concern, perhaps from reports from the engineer's office about the cost of demolition that I think held us back. I was looking through some of my emails and notes in preparation for tonight. That seemed to be where we were. So I don't know, you can ask Mr. Minsterman perhaps to share the Baldwick information on the estimates if there were. I'm not saying he knows right now. In fact, I'm sure he doesn't. So we would want to get that from him in the future. And then if somebody wants 1528 or 1428 bar, they should let the borough know, and we can work with them through the sheriff's sale process.
Well, what was the outcome of the 96 Noble Avenue shares?
96 Noble was inspected and has been put on notice it's going to be deemed condemned.
So we went through a similar process, and then eventually whoever got it just didn't have wherewithal to do it, and now it's gonna just get pretty much condemned?
Well, it is going to be condemned by the borough.
Right, and they have to bring it.
That to make repairs, or
Correct.
you condemn it.
That's that is one person that actually got back to us, though.
He did.
Which was really, I was
Well, They
surprised.
just recently bought it.
Right.
Yeah,
Relatively
yeah.
purchased, so they did a lot of work to clean it
Well,
out.
Brad, to your point, or to your question and to the point, historically, wherever I have been, it's the tax elephant in the room that does the sheriff's zone, that's the school district. Because if they're not on board, it's not a great process, it's a terrible process. So some coordination with the solicitor and the school board to work together and lead this process, in my opinion, makes the most sense, rather than the one-third entity of the school district trying to carry everybody else.
First point, I'm just here to try to move the conversation.
I understand.
forward,
I'm
since
just-
these issues have come up.
Sure.
With every council I've been on.
I'm trying to get my hands around all the properties in the borough. Been a little busy, but being facetious there, but I have been a little busy. But there's definitely a need for a concrete way to go. The staff has no idea. I frankly don't have any idea. That goes maybe to Mike's point too, about coordinating some of these things, because a lot of this is an inspection issue too.
I'll just say this, that I've seen the list, there is a list that's floating
Yes.
around from a couple of years ago, maybe, dated 17 or 18, I think when I first was engaged. And, I think, Russ, you just called it an elephant, right, the tax elephant. The whole thing is an elephant, and you can't eat it in one bite. You gotta
Right.
take little bites at it. So, when, I guess this would have been 18, council identified 3 or 4 properties, and we attacked them. From a demo perspective, from a notice of violation, condemnation, tax sales, et cetera, and you were pretty successful at that point. So I would suggest that you go through the list, identify the worst offenders or the targets, and then we can develop a strategy for each. But you can't just, hope that somebody walks in here, or Russ is gonna figure it out. We both, and engineer, we all need direction from council.
So, question, is there anything that would get council sideways in a legal way with regards to publishing some of these properties on our website so people know what the opportunities are, so they can take?
No. It's all public information if they're tax delinquent.
Because I think people that are in that market to do rehabs don't know what the opportunities are, and we need to do a better job. And, there are some properties that have come up through the side yard program that you think to yourself, well, the right person would have been able to bring that property back up to speed. And I think we need to move forward with that. So I'm gonna.
Well, I mean, I think the worst offenders in this room, we can definitely agree
Correct.
that the house, no longer 100%. The rest I would concur with Mr. Corbel, that some triangulation with Mike and Mr. Corbel and yourself as to capturing the blight anywhere you come into Crafton should be our #1 priority. If you're coming in from the city side or from the city side or from Ingram's side, anywhere that there is something that would welcome you to Crafton and you see something out of place, that's by far should be for me, obviously I'm asking council to chime in as well, to be our #1 priority.
The flip market is very hot in Pittsburgh, Allegheny counties. If you put a list on it, you might generate synergies.
Okay.
Mr. President, Councilwoman Perry, if I can speak to this as well too. I know the list of the blighted properties are put together. I know I believe there were some successes where property owners turned around and fixed up the property, is that correct? Through
Yeah.
the blighted
Yeah,
process?
yeah, so I think it needs to be a multi-pronged approach. I mean, I'm not trying to help you out here, I know you're on the other. So with regards to this, I think giving all the people that are on the list, maybe I noticed, hey, we're gonna publish this on the website, and then we're going to, you know, with regards to Baldwick, can we just move forward with, do we have a motion just to the demo, or how do we go
If you
about?
want to demo Baldwick, you should ask Rick to do, we usually do a cost estimate. He has, I think he has one, they can
I
update
think
it.
there was last
Yeah.
year.
Then you can update it, make sure it's good, and then you all can decide at the next meeting if you want
Right.
to authorize advertising. I think it was more than,
Do we need a motion to do that, or?
I think it
or-
was,
More than a typical demo.
there's some sort of topographical
Yes.
challenges,
Yes.
if I remember.
So
Yeah, it's uphill and there's,
Yeah. Yeah, you live near there, so you,
I do.
you're very familiar with it.
I would ask that this body put that motion on the next,
Yeah, do we need a motion, Rick, to do that, or can we go forward with that?
to knock down Laura Avenue in the
Right.
next meeting.
So you got your charge,
Yes.
so
Get it out,
move
get it-
forward with the specs on
Construction
Baldwick,
estimate,
and
yeah.
then we'll come back and motion to move forward with that. Get that.
Mr. President, with respect to bar, we were talking about possibly getting it back on the tax rolls and trying to reach out to the school board to maybe have them on their end. Could we are we able to instruct the solicitor to reach out to the school board to
Yeah.
that extent?
Well, I think we should give them an updated list, right, and then go with the updated list.
Yeah, we should update the list and then have to talk to the district.
Okay, and we would get the updated list from the manager and code enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, I have the list from,
Yeah, is there anything else that we?
I can
Right,
I think the
from
market-
from the summer that we had the blight committee, the
Yeah.
joint blight committee,
yeah,
something came out of that and then
Yep.
it was refined.
We have a new inspector on board from BIU that will be more than happy to accommodate and to get you an up-to-date list together, I'm sure. He's been a much better resource than what we have had.
All right,
So
so,
I will instruct him first thing tomorrow morning.
okay, thank you. So, should we review the list before, so the next meeting, we'll review the list, and then tell you,
We had knocked down Baldwick.
right,
We know that.
Right.
Just put it on the agenda, please, Mr. President.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yes,
Mr. President.
Rick has a question.
yes.
What is the street address on Baldwin?
52.
52 Baldwin.
Don't want to think the wrong house.
You can't miss it.
That's true.
All right,
Is somebody off?
Are we good?
Jan Baldwin.
That's a valid point.
I gotta catch myself, I keep on. So, recreation plan update, Mr. Crown.
Yeah, I looked at and talked to Rick Minsterman about the last rec plan that was done. Last rec plan I believe we did was 2014. In that rec plan, it basically concentrated on some of the pole upgrades that we did do. And there was a further second phase to that we did not do. And some of the monies under that, we used the plan to go ahead with DCNR to fill out applications that were successfully funded through the process to do some of the upgrade some of the recreation that we have in Crafton. I deal with a lot of the youth, and some of the comments that are coming out is some of the park lists that we have, even though they are they're an asset to the borough, they're starting to show some age and show some more, wear to them. And I guess my question or proposal is to go ahead and work with Gateway to do another rec plan and put together a comprehensive recreation plan so that for the next X amount of years, either councils can, follow the plan or they can choose to do other. But if it's in the planning phase, we can't get any grants without planning. And how can we adequately and have the financial restraint to just not hodgepodge, hey, Linwood needs some work over here, Noble needs some work here, the Crafton Park needs work here, without pulling all of our resources together, the rec board, CIT baseball, Little Cougar football, Carlton soccer, some of the preschool programs, some of the parents, pull them together, get them in a room, and develop a good comprehensive recreation plan that we can look at. With that plan, we can then go after DCNR money to fund some of those projects. Again, in the past, we've had pretty good success with our DCNR money that we received in Crafton. But under the 2004 plan, basically most of the projects within that plan have been funded, or we've turned back some money at the pool for the second phase. So I think it would be good for us to look at least writing a grant to DCNR to pay for half the funding to do a rec plan. And once we get that plan, then we can all have the group meetings like they did with Thrive, and we're gonna look at the zoning ordinances to start to put together a comprehensive plan, so we can start mapping and visioning out the borough. You know, I know the last meeting they talked about doing with the zoning, planning, you know, parks and recreations are a big thing, you know, and just keep mapping ourselves out for the future, so that we know where we want to head, get the community input on that, so that we have a good workable plan.
Okay, so one of the things that I'd like to throw out there in support of this idea is, we have the planning commission, and we have currently a 5-member board, and we could expand it up to 9, and I know some of the hesitation or feelings of the planning commission is that, you know, we're gonna be giving them a lot of responsibility and a lot of work to do, and we're providing their recommendations with updated zoning, and there's gonna be a lot of input needed, and a lot of actually, you know, work from our volunteers. Maybe we could maybe start with adding 2 more people to the planning commission to help lead the charge on this, to sort of help facilitate the work plan here. And that way we are doing zoning and we're doing the rec plan update, and we can, you know, figure out, you know, what the community's input is. And that way we're drawing attention to the planning commission. One of the things that I've tried to do in leadership is, you know, get the planning commission to be a part of the government that is doing more proactive work versus reactive. Historically, the planning commission, you know, was called on only when the manager needed an application reviewed and approved. So, with that being said, you know, I think this is a good opportunity. I just wanted to add to the conversation.
Can I say something? We did vote on it, and we voted that for 9 people. And 2 months ago, I brought applications in here, and nothing's been done with them.
So, thank you for the comment. We're gonna have to wait for citizen comment, but to that, we're talking about the planning commission, the planning commission end of this. So it's sort of a
Rick, how do other communities do? I mean, I know last time we had Jamie Beach, who was here with the, you know, she was involved in, you know, a lot of Parks and Recs in her other jobs, and she did some stuff here. What do you think that a good viable process to get a good viable plan?
So basically, some of the details are April of this year is the application deadline for submitting a request for a grant to develop the plan. So it would be a master rec plan. So it would address what your plans are. So it would take a while, it would take the entire year to develop that plan. And the DCNR has very specific ways of doing it. So there are committees that are established, or I should say there is a committee established. There are a series of town hall meetings, and where people come in, you solicit the associations that you mentioned, Mr. Crown, and so everyone gets an input, but there are very specific ways of doing it. So the first step I would think is, if you're interested, is to submit the grant. Like, let's not miss the opportunity for the April grant submittal. So Gateway could help you, the manager, or the manager could assist us, however the level of comfort would be, to prepare the grant to develop the plan. Now, these plans, Mr. Crown also mentioned that they're funded at 50%, and Crafton has gone through this process, and it was funded. at 50%, and the projects that came after that plan, that were in the plan, were funded as well. So, as Mr. Crown also mentioned, most of that plan has sort of been exhausted. It's old, and there are different desires in many cases by municipalities on how recreation should look. So, developing the plan itself is not something Gateway would do. It's something that you would have a planning consultant come in. And so you would have, you would solicit proposals, you would interview those consultants, and then you would select one, and they would help you through the process that the DCNR provides to develop that plan. And with the intention of, number one, understanding what you and your community wants, and what you could get funding for. So the first step, like I mentioned, is in April. I think we submit the grant application to get the plan developed. Now, these plans, they can cost between $50,000 and $80,000. I think the last one that you did was maybe 70, somewhere around there. The idea here, I think, would be to build on that plan. If there's anything salvageable in the plan, to utilize that as a basis and then develop onward. But certainly, whatever your committee would choose to do, or your consultant would choose to do. So, like I said, Gateway can help with actually putting the application together, getting it into the April deadline, with the anticipation that you would be funded. You're a past grant receiver from DCNR. They like that. They like repetition. They'll trust in that you'll spend the funds wisely. You have a reputation for that. So I think it's favorable that you will be funded. One of the ideas, or one of the things that we'll have to do, is come up with that cost estimate to develop that plan. And we do enough planning to help you with that cost estimate. But as far as the details associated with the planning activities, it should truly be a planner, a company that just does that. So if that makes sense, then the next steps would be to authorize your manager to submit a grant under this program, and the Gateway could assist. There are a lot of technical aspects of the grant that they would ask that would probably be out of the realm of your manager, and so we could help with that. And then I believe, based on the schedule that one of our PMs gave us, the grants are awarded in November 2020, which would obviously be this year, and then the process for developing that master plan would be from November through March, and then trying to meet the deadline for 2021, April, to submit projects. So that would sort of be somewhat of an aggressive plan, but you'd have November through March to develop the plan. Once the plan's developed and approved by the DCNR, then the intent would be to make application to whatever your priority project or projects would be that would come out of the plan in April 2021.
Okay, so
I'll just add that when you go through the DCNR project, it's a lot, I don't want to say easier, but you're much more likely to receive a grant when you apply for a project that is a result of a DCNR approved plan. I've experienced that at Ross and other people. It's a good idea.
Would we need a motion tonight, or just at the second meeting to have the manager
To do a resolution.
for a resolution?
There's probably a resolution, right?
It is part of the application, but to just get the application
So
started.
next meeting, we need to have a resolution prepared to authorize the engineer to apply for the grant?
No, there's usually a grant with a resolution with the grant application authorizing the submission of the
Okay.
application. So
Okay.
it's just a
If we're
form.
behind it.
Okay, I just need to.
But you should direct
Try
Rick
To get started.
You need to direct Rick to get started on it if that's the desire of council.
Right.
So what sort of costs would we be looking at, and,
All right, so motion
For
to,
us to,
Yes.
we need a
for us to do
motion.
the work, right.
right,
Good question. I don't know exactly. I don't prepare these applications. It's less than $5,000, $3,000 or $4,000. What we could do is submit a work authorization to you if you want to wait until the next meeting to approve that work authorization, or we can get started and send the work authorization so that you know what it costs to actually prepare the grant application. Part of the reason I don't know is because it depends on how much your manager is able to contribute as well.
So my understanding of the budget is that there should be enough in the recreation budget to fund the application work.
Okay, so make a motion to approve the borough manager along with Gateway Engineer to formulate a application for the DCNR grant for a master comprehensive parks plan.
Second it.
Any discussion in addition to what we've discussed? Any public comment, please? You have a, Marcia Damons?
Yes.
Please come forward. Nice to see you back.
Where Coletta had ordered at the last budget meeting, a playscape from Linwood Park.
I did not personally order it. We put the funding in, and that is not to this motion. It's in the budget, and that will be a question that you can submit at the end of the meeting, because what's on the floor right now is the motion to apply for the grant to develop the recreation plan. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yep, correct. So,
So
all right.
let's come back up.
Yeah, and just to move forward, I mean, we're gonna try to, instead of doing like Q&A, if you have a question, and then we'll try to address that. So.
We can address that after we vote. I call it vote.
Right, all right. All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
All right, all that opposed? Motion passes. All right, thank you.
I have a question before we move on.
Yeah.
State Representative DC worked with former manager RJ Susko and got us about $375,000 in a grant that was to be put toward the pool and toward recreational things. Where is that money and what's happening with that money?
Managers.
And I apologize, I should have mentioned that in my comments. That is still under environmental review by the state of Pennsylvania. And until that environmental review is completed, that's only when the county will then take it, and that's only when I can deal with the county to get those monies. So it's a long process. It comes from the state, it's administered through the county sends the study to the state, and it's still being looked at. It's not been completed, and Gateway nor I can move until it goes back to the county's hand with approval from the state.
A lot of this are our new playground
Wow.
surfaces.
This is playground services, this is the pool liner, this is $350,000 of total grant money. That is-
375.
Okay, but you're probably right, I think it is 200 and 175. It's a process. It's a process, and we're dealing with Kathy down in the county, and she knows where we're at, and we're waiting.
And Mr. President, I know working with Manager McKibben, he's come up with, try to find ways around, and unfortunately, from our understanding is, this is a type of grant that has to be administered 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't even deviate 2.5, otherwise you can lose the funds. So
If we go ahead and
explore
authorize
options.
a bid and take a bid and get the project done, and it's not done with the specifications that they demand, we're out. So, it's frustrating, it's very frustrating, I'll be honest with you, but it is,
Yeah, we have to jump through the hoops to get the prize.
right, it is the process, and so that's right.
Thank you.
But one other comment, I'm sorry,
Yes.
on the previous motion. I really, you know your strengths and you know your weaknesses. I really need assistance on this DCNR stuff. It's not one of my strong points. I'll admit when I don't have one, and that's one. So, utilizing the services of Gateway is imperative for us to move forward, because it just, I only have so many hands, and there's 3 of us in the office.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next discussion section item is permanent meter parking surrounding busway. Mr. Sala.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Unfortunately, I had some technical difficulties. I do have a presentation that a resident had sent over, so I wasn't able to get up on the screen.
You want me to help you, or?
We tried,
Okay.
but it needs an HDMI.
We need an
Um,
HDMI to Apple connection.
Yeah, if you want to use my laptop, you can. If you want to send it, yeah, that's fine.
That would be great now.
Do you want to skip it and then come back?
Yeah,
to
we
it?
can skip it and come back. So, Mr. Crown, rules for meetings.
Yeah, part of the thing that I have seen was a lot of, it's much better tonight, is the continuity of the meetings. And I know that, talking to Phil, was that in the past, the borough has a couple different ordinances or resolutions that were passed for rules of government, and how this council as a whole should conduct themselves. One was dated back in the early 2000, another was dated 2014. So I had to send some of this information over to Phil to look at, and I believe he sent an email out to everybody to look at, and trying to gauge thoughts or ideas or understanding of what they think about the rules of government.
So basically, the 2014 resolution nullifies anything that was done
Right.
prior to that. So
It-
that's what's in effect.
Actually, it only nullifies anything that's inconsistent. So if there's no inconsistencies with the, I believe it's 2002, which
I don't think I've ever seen the 2002. Was that put in our,
no, it was something that I had, I think Mike had passed along from his prior time on council. But whenever I reviewed it, it was actually more of the same. There really wasn't the
there's nothing that we
inconsistency.
have to pull forward from 2002 that is not inclusive of 2014?
Nothing that we haven't already changed, like the dates and times of the meetings,
Of those sorts of
things of that nature, yes. Because I had worked, or began working to try and just merge the 2 documents and try to make one cohesive document. And then as I was going through, I found that language was different, but for the intent and purposes, it was the same.
So then basically, we can work with the 2014.
I believe so, yes. I mean, I think we can maybe put our own spin on it, because there are some things that, me as an attorney, I don't like permissive language, or putting things in there like ideals, because it just, I mean, there's nothing hard behind it, so to speak. But maybe we can update it and take out that permissive language and the lofty ideals of a council, and kind of just take this, I think it's about 10 pages, and maybe boil it down to something that
Yeah,
you
it depends on how you print it out, but it's at least 6 pages.
okay, sorry. So maybe even boil it down to something a little bit even smaller.
Okay, Mr. Crown?
Just wanted to throw it out there, see where we can go with it.
And I've been, this is something that's a little pet project of mine. I've been kind of digging into it, geeking out a little bit, so to speak. And I'd be more than happy to, I wrote stuff up prior to taking a seat, prior to learning of the 2014 resolution, and be more than happy to kind of take this and put a modern spin, especially based off of the separation of these discussions with the voting meetings. And I'd be more than happy to take the lead on that.
Okay.
I have a question. How do we enforce these rules? It's just
You enforce your own rules. You can suspend your rules, you can amend your rules, so it's really up to the body. There's no, I mean, I've looked at this purported 2002 set of rules. I mean, there's really no enforcement in here. And there's a rule that allows the president to modify the rules as he or she may be deemed necessary. So, you know, y'all are gonna have to decide how you want to govern yourselves. You know, I think my view is that there's a lot in here that doesn't need to be in these rules, like the order of business. Like, I get it that we have an order of business on our agenda, but you shouldn't have a rule that says that. You should just, because you want to be flexible, like maybe you need a discussion meeting, and maybe 6 months from now you don't need discussion items, or maybe you want to do the Pledge of Allegiance at some other time. I don't know. But there's just a lot in here that I view as superfluous and unnecessary. So, again, happy to weigh in on whatever the working group puts together.
All right, so you want to have a working group, or you can keep it?
I mean, I'm more than happy to have more eyes on it than, because I may think it reads one way, Councilwoman Perry may read it a different way, and if that's the case, then we need to go back to the drawing board, so I'm more than happy to have multiple eyes on it.
Okay, so show of hands, who wants to help out? Okay. All right, so that was.
So then I'm assuming once you have something worked out, we'll have an expanded opportunity
Send it
to
to
look
council
at
as a
it and
whole.
discuss
Oh,
it.
correct, yes. You don't want to put anything that's less than a college product in terms of.
No, okay. All right, so Mr. Alo and Mr. Kraus are going to propose some updated rules of government and send it to council as a whole to review, and we can discuss it at the next discussion meeting. How about that?
I will be happy to report.
Okay. Great. And
I have a comment. You know, the rules and regulations were written in 2014, but obviously they're not enforced. I mean, a few weeks ago, we had a council person sit in here and use profanity, and the president, there's a rule here, a rule to follow that the president should follow, and warning that council person about using profanities. The S word, the four-letter S word, and
I can put it into a
excuse
swear jar.
me, I have the floor here. The four-letter S word that the council president used in a public meeting, and the president said absolutely nothing. It's written here that the president has an obligation to at least warn that councilman that you're not gonna put up with obscene language. Like
thank you.
the four-letter, what do you mean thank you?
No,
Not
I
done yet.
agree. Thank you.
The four-letter S word, not to be used. He spelled it twice, so that we clearly understood what he was saying. And you neglected your job in correcting him and warning him that he should not do that again.
Actually, I'd like to.
So what is the value of this? What's the value of these rules and regulations? And now you wanna, can I finish speaking? May I finish speaking, please?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the value of these rules and regulations if they're not being reinforced? And what's the value of Mr. Alo rewriting them, putting his spin on it? I mean, what's the value of that? They're written, it's right here. You have to enforce it. If you don't enforce it, it doesn't mean anything.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Emmett.
You're welcome.
Mr. President, if I may have the floor. So in regards to the rules, I do know that the version that was written in 2014 does have some conflicts. That the reason for, a big part of the reason for the rewrite is to make sure that there are no conflicts with the current borough code, and that things are fair, as well as we want to make sure that every person in this room has their say and does abide, hopefully does abide by those rules and treats every single person in this room with respect and with proper decorum. Because we do not want screaming, we do not want yelling, we do not want people disrespecting other members of the community as well as other members of council. And I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Sala. Thank you, Mr. Amendola. All right.
So,
So-
there's no answer to my question, or?
So, we're gonna move forward.
So we're gonna do,
Fred, we're moving forward. Just like we said, just let's move forward. Enough. Go ahead, move forward. Gosh, we beat the same drum how many times?
Let me-
Move forward.
Let me just say, excuse me, let me just say this.
He
Let's
doesn't wanna do his
please,
job.
let's please move
Would
forward.
you like to see him do his job?
I think
Maybe
he's
not.
doing fine. So obviously, you just want to bring things up and throw bombs. Could you just move on?
Yes,
Bomb?
on,
I'm
back,
serious about this.
back
I'm not
to,
gonna,
back to
no
meters.
sense in having.
Mr. Amendola, I'm gonna have to call you
But
to
just
order.
cut it. It's nothing.
Mr. Amendola, I have to call you to order,
Okay,
all right?
I
Thank
am
you.
in order.
Thank you. All right, let's move back to permit meter parking surrounding the busway led by Mr. Saba. It is a presentation, this is from a resident.
Correct. So,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President, thank you. This presentation actually came out of because numerous residents have been bringing up this issue for many years to council. In fact, there has been multiple articles that are written as well. So, and I do know that when I did bring this up as an agenda item, Manager McKibben actually brought this up in observation of just driving around the borough and especially in and around the busway. What we're discovering is a lot of folks that are not Crafton residents, nor are they customers of Crafton, whether it be any of the businesses here, are coming to Crafton parking, not just in the designated spots that are for the Port Authority, but they're also parking in other areas that's affecting local businesses as well as residents. So this resident was kindly enough to put this presentation together. So some of the issues that residents have noticed and other business owners have noticed as well too is that they're parking way too close to driveways for residents to be able to back out of their driveways safely without hitting another vehicle, as well as blocking driveways. And then some of the other issues are preventing access to homes by contractors, delivery drivers, any services that are done on properties. Having that many cars in front of properties kind of inhibits a homeowner wanting to utilize their property. And as some of you probably noticed, this meeting started at 7:15. I know driving here at 7:05, 7:10, there were still quite a few cars parked in and around residential areas. So and here are some pictures, some examples. You can see where folks are parking that are a little bit too close. So right here you can see where the busway is. And then this is actually, because people are parking so close to driveways, this is actually causing folks to move their vehicles to prevent the commuters parking too close to their driveways so they're able to get in and out of their properties safely. As you can see, the timestamp, 8:30 in the morning, roughly is when the pictures were taken. And these are all commuters. Same vehicle, still here, 5:48 p.m., same time at 7:24. So this car's been here almost 12 hours, so this is not just somebody that's going to and from work. And it does get pretty extensive. I've seen vehicles go up the whole way, well beyond the business district and into more of the residential areas as well. And a lot of these homes either have very small driveways or don't have driveways at all. So this does cause an issue for homeowners. You can see more examples. So this is roughly the area that is affected by the busway. So the busway is right here. And this is where the designated parking is for the busway. But we have folks who are parking all around other areas, this is a mainly residential area. And I've also seen folks parking in and around here, and they start affecting the businesses in this area as well too. And I do know that if any resident wants to come to the Borough building to come speak with the Borough staff, there is very few parking spots, and if there are any parking spots, there is nowhere to park. The one day I had to stop by the Borough building, I had to circle around a few times, and was fortunate enough to get parking down by Serafina's and walk to the Borough building, just because there are no spots, because commuters are really taking advantage of the free parking that's here. So I'm asking council to come up with a solution. I do know, I believe that you had discussed that there was a meeting with the Port Authority a few weeks back, that they actually did recommend permit parking in the area. So this is something that I would like as a council to address, because I do know, like I said, it's not just residents that are bringing this issue up, this is also business owners. And if we want to focus on making Crafton continuing as a community that's thriving with more investment from homeowners as well as business owners, we want to make sure that we're able to give access to folks to be able to access the businesses as well as their own homes. So whether that has to involve, it's probably going to involve multiple different entities, whether it's code enforcement, as well as our police department. So I just want to see what we can do if we needed to create a work group. But this is something, and this is just one area of the borough that we need to address when it comes to parking.
Well, it is definitely something that needs more study, and you guys, I think we as council need to put together a work group on that subject. Manager McKibben, did you say that the police department has some software or has something?
No, what I said was that the software they used to, in my day, had a permit parking program as part of it. Whether they can purchase it now, I have no clue. I have a suspicion that that company got out of that business.
Okay.
As well as they had a meter program as well, because we had Bulls and Dormont all around the T. If we didn't have that, we'd have the same scenario you have here, and that's what we had. And the only way to eliminate that is permit parking and meter parking, of which we have neither. We have 4-hour parking that's unenforced. I many times have to park across Noble Avenue on the other side in a residential area to come to work. I don't mind walking, I really don't. I don't mean it that way, but there's no parking for anybody to visit the municipal offices or the library. I walk around, White Avenue is filled, East Crafton is filled. There is no parking, and there's 5 or 6 spaces going up from the Sunoco, and I don't, that'd be nice, it would be, I don't know, is that Noble going up there? No. Always taken, and they're there all day. If you're gonna do a permit parking, there is software out there. It needs to be enforced, on a constant, regular basis. I only ask that you, if you do this, please don't make it a function of the 2 borough staff members I have. They don't have the time.
Okay.
That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. McKibben. We've used Dormont, this has come up at least twice, and we've used Dormont as a kind of like a, you know, like a touchstone. We never had any first-hand experience, and being that you did mention the T and the streets around the T there, can you just continue just that train of thought about like what it might look like to have meter parking vis-a-vis, you know, enforced permit parking, or would you start with one or the other, or would you do both in tandem, or would you ease people in? Like, how would you?
It all depends on what, I think it all depends on what you're trying to tackle. If you're trying to loosen up parking in front of the business section and help them, I think you have to go with meters. If you're trying to loosen up parking in front of, in a residential area, then I think you have to go permit parking. It all depends on what issue you're trying to tackle.
Well, I mean, I think both of those issues are at play. It's just a matter of, we talked about this, but we never had such a, you know, such something that was so forceful that we could actually see it and see it mapped out. I mean, this is, because this right here is the Mayor's Street, and that's not, to my knowledge, a business district. So clearly there's 2 different paths here, and I'm just, you know, that's what I was curious about your thoughts.
The only solution I see is to get the Port Authority to eliminate this bus stop, and you'll have no parking problems. Seriously.
Yeah.
Because there was no problems until the Port Authority put the station in, right? So, and if you take these problems, which you have highlighted, Anthony, over there, and you try to enforce permit parking or metered parking, those people are going to move further into the neighborhoods. And we discussed this before, this council, or previous council has discussed it before, that all it's gonna do is push the parking issues further into the neighborhoods where there's even less driveway parking that go on. To take a trip, you have up to Park Street on there, go up another block. So if somebody is in that yellow area that ends there at North Emily and Park, and they 4 cars move up to the next, like, that takes it up to Ward Street. Now you're past Ward Street, and the cars are parking there all day. The residents, again, that area on North Emily Street between North Linwood and Coulter, there's no residents on that left side.
So let me ask this question. So clearly there is an issue. We know that Port Authority is not going to do the busway. In fact, they're trying to get more folks to utilize the busway, whether it be autonomous vehicles, so that this is not going to go away. What would you suggest as a solution to help ease some of the pains that residents and business owners are facing in those corridors?
So I believe we're not gonna solve this tonight. I think that the mayor, may I invite you to a committee, where a work group, where it's the mayor, the council president, Mr. Saba, and we go work with the planning commission and talk about this there and bring, that way we can have a forum and think about this, and bring some ideas to the table, because I don't think we're gonna solve it tonight. However, I will say that the planning commission has had a conversation about this with Port Authority. It got brought up with Port Authority a month and a half ago about walk sheds. They are moving in this direction. They actually want to encourage us to get people to park out into the neighborhoods and to walk to the busway. So there are some issues here because we basically are diametrically opposed in philosophy between what Port Authority actually wants to see us do, which is to push people further out into the neighborhoods, which goes back to we need to have a permitting regimen in place because we have already heard from our residents that it's unacceptable to allow people to park in their neighborhoods for 30 days at a time because they ditched their vehicle in Crafton and they took a trip on the bus and flew out of Pittsburgh. And they know Crafton's a fairly safe community and they feel comfortable leaving their vehicles here. So I think we're not going to solve the problem tonight, but I think we definitely need to take the conversation offline, work with the planning commission, and the mayor and I can bounce ideas offline with the 3 of us here, and then come back to council in the beginning of April. Does that sound like an okay idea?
Sure.
I have a 2-parter for the officers. So, to the mayor's point, I hear you, and you make a good point. And I would submit that, we would not want to just push the problem down the road to the other streets, so fair point. To Mr. McKibben's point though, if we're going to shake loose some parking, would it just be an enforcement issue to start, just by having an officer go in and doing the initial enforcements? Because, I have taken advantage of parking everywhere in the city of Pittsburgh. I'm not afraid to wear it. I go to the south side and park where I can. But if someone's going to get me after 4 or 5 hours, I'm going to get out of there. Now, some won't, and some will. And I think the idea is to push off those people who are abusing the system, and we know they're going to park there for the work. And if they're there after a certain time, can we enforce that? Start with that?
Well, and this is where technology has come a long ways. There are other solutions now in 2020 that are software-based, that are being used in other communities, across the country, and I think we need to explore those options and bring them back to council and figure out what's managed.
Technology like a ticket. Like we put a ticket on the
Well, first you need to be able to manage who's who and where they're parking, right? So there isn't too much administrative burden on our police department, right? If we're saying that we're going to ask the mayor have his officers, do some targeted enforcement in some neighborhoods, and we have permit. Obviously it's going to have to be a targeted enforcement situation where you're going to say, all right, I'm going to enforce these corridors because we have overwhelming amount of complaints, and that's the way we're gonna have to triage and manage the situation, right? We're gonna have to come up with a strategy that's fair and manageable to the resources that we have. I mean, to Manager McKibben's point, you know.
So you just mentioned officer enforcement, and I think that is the heart of the issue. And I don't know any communities that I park in, such as Swiftly, sent there regularly for doctors and that sort of thing. They have dedicated enforcement.
Parking authority.
Parking authority, and that burden isn't pushed onto the
Okay.
police department.
Does-
The other thing that I wanted to mention is, I wonder how much of the parking is actually being used by residents who live a quarter of a mile or half a mile away from the bus station.
Yeah.
And what kind of encouragement there could be, or shuttle there could be,
Correct.
where people would leave their cars at home a half a mile away. Because almost every place in this borough is no more than a half a mile away. And so I think that's another thing that needs to be addressed, is looking for incentives for people to keep their cars at home and walk there.
Wholeheartedly agree, great point.
Mr. President, so it sounds like we need to take this discussion offline, have a work group, and come back to council with potential options to get through.
Okay.
I just want to ask the
That's right.
manager, did Borough have a parking authority that enforced that?
We had parking enforcement people that were not police officers. Not a parking authority per se, but they were,
Hired by Dormont to specifically address the parking
Yes.
nightmare.
yes.
Mr. Sabe, your presentation choked up there.
Well, presentations that were
Did
so.
you turn it off?
No, it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you knew it did.
No, but that's all I have, Mr. President.
Okay, and since I mentioned the planning commission multiple times, we actually have a planning commissioner here. I'm gonna invite her up real quickly, since I summoned you guys multiple times so far.
It is on this topic, so can I say something?
Yeah.
Kirsten Capitello, 23 Hawthorne. I will be brief because I have way too many things I want to say on this topic. And I'll just be brief and say the planning commission has talked about this before. I had previous conversations with the last borough manager that didn't go anywhere, and I would like to see them go somewhere. So please include the planning commission in moving this forward, because I think there is interest.
All right, thank you. All right. And, so the last item, long-range project fund.
Wait,
Oh, sorry. Sorry. What-
Sorry, Clay, that was my fault, I kind of blew.
That's okay.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, that was not.
Update on conversations surrounding Steuben Street athletics.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
So basically, I'm looking to find out if there has been any contact by the school district, any updates, anything happening on the athletic field. Since we had our meeting in December and did not do the reverter clause, and we had over 50 people there. There, just want to make sure that we are updating and we are transparent with our community if there's any new activity on it. Also, beyond that, there were a number of people who suggested and made some interesting suggestions about if there are any ways for the borough themselves to get control of that property for other purposes. So, two questions there.
Okay, so to my knowledge, there hasn't been any movement. I haven't heard from the school district or anybody from that development group or the other development group that reached out last year since the last time I updated you guys, you all. And I just want to let you all know, I keep on saying you guys, we're originally from New Jersey. It's not about any gender yins. I just want to make sure. All right, all right. So I just want to, so no, to that, and then the second part?
Well, the second thing is to open, discussion. We had a number of community members who made some very interesting suggestions, and there continues to be this thread about, is there some way for the borough itself to get control of that property? And there were a number of different ideas that were pushed out. And so I didn't want that idea to be totally forgotten.
Okay, so, I think, let me ask you this question. So, are you proposing that we consider making an offer to the district to acquire the property?
I don't know that I am necessarily making that proposal
Okay,
at this point. I think that, on the surface, it seems ludicrous because the number, the purchase price that the other developer was suggesting. But interestingly, if we're talking about applications for recreation planning, other things that, might be happening with regard to, expansion of, of borough or police offices or anything like that, are there some other avenues that we might explore? I mean, I don't have a
When I
specific
talk
proposal.
to Rick about part of the DCNR money, you can purchase and acquire property through some of those grants.
Really?
Yeah,
Yes.
we've talked about some of those things, but again, it has to be part of a plan.
Right, so this would be out a little further.
Yeah, it would be
It would be
out.
a couple of years in the future, is what we're saying.
Mr. President, so in regards to that property, because it is a school district that's leading it, I do feel before we even open it up to discussion, whether a developer, whether it be a Sheets or a Gecko, whoever the developer is, or whether it's the borough that purchases the property, I really think the school board needs to come to the residents of Crafton and explain what's going on, why we're looking to sell the property. Because to me, as a resident, there might be, I feel there might be a bigger issue than just selling the property, given the fact that they're not coming to us saying, hey, we want to revert the property back to Crafton, let you guys use it. There was a developer that was brought in. So to me, it seems like they're trying to make it a tax revenue generating property, but I can't answer for the school board. So I think the first step we need is to have the school board come and address council, come and address the residents as to what their plan is, because this is not something that Crafton as a council that we're leading. This is something from, I know this predates me being on council, but from my understanding as a resident, it was the school board that was leading the charge on this, and they were just asking council to revert the property back.
I can speak at least to what was communicated to us during that whole process, and their focus was on the purchase price. When we started doing some modeling about tax revenue, no one on their side had even considered it and had not considered the implications, because we did some modeling where the purchase price, the initial purchase price might be lower, but because of the usage, it would generate more tax revenue year over year, and we demonstrated, the points where the payouts would be about the same and exceed, and no one on their side had done any of that. So just from implication, it seemed that mostly they were looking to sell that asset so that they can do, and they have said this in public meetings, that sale price for that property would not go to filling a budget gap, but could only be used for capital improvements to their other assets. So that's my recollection of our experience over that 18 months. Not to say that we shouldn't have the school board involved, and maybe, the school board has some idea that Crafton has some interest in maybe looking at working on a 2 or 3 year plan that would allow us to acquire that property.
Boy, a big recreational place for kids, wouldn't that be?
We have $2 million recreational plan done by CIT too. I'm not saying, but these are all projects that I think
Exactly.
that we can look in after, if we get the grant to do the
To
rec
do the
plan.
study, yes.
I think that, why not use somebody else, half of somebody else's money to see if some of these projects are viable?
Right,
If they're still there when,
right.
in a year from now.
But it all goes back to the owner of the property.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, and it all depends,
Mr.
you're right, on the other.
Mr. Aiello is ready.
I definitely think it's worth it to get the school board involved, because it was my understanding that the sales agreement between the school board and the developer was already executed. And even as we sit here today, the property is still in escrow contingent on that reverter. So until they both back out of that contract, I mean, the school board's hands are tied in terms of the sale. I mean, my understanding of it could be completely dead wrong. And I don't think, none of us are school board members, so we can't really
Well,
speak on that without getting their input on it.
From what I understand, that contract, if we don't do anything, it's just gonna expire. That's what I understand, right?
I don't know, I do not recall, I've read it, but I don't recall that detail like that.
Okay.
Probably be something for our solicitor to speak to, or for the school board to give their interpretation on.
Okay.
Get the school board.
All right, so if there's anything pertaining to that situation, if anybody comes back, I will update council and the community.
Yeah, and there have been some questions about the fact that that property was originally acquired by the Crafton School District, and that the Carlington School District has said that it is no longer needed for school activities. And does that open anything in the law? And I see a no, shaking his head no.
I don't believe so. I mean,
Okay.
the
All
school
right.
district, Carlton succeeded the Crafton School District, so.
All right.
Would that only go into effect, let's say, if the school district dissolved, would those assets go back to the original community, or no?
I don't
Would go,
believe so. I don't know the answer to that.
Let's not be
It's a
talking
little-
about the school board
Okay.
dissolved, the
Right.
school
I'm
district
just
dissolved.
asking
Yeah.
a question.
That's, no.
Devil's advocate going on.
Mr. President, if I may, so, Ms. Perry, thank you for bringing this up, because I know numerous times, every single one of us has said, we encourage, we're all residents, not only of Crafton, but we are taxpayers to Crafton School District. So I advise every single person in this room and every resident out there and every business owner, taxpayer within Crafton School District, attend the school board meetings, question them, ask them what's going on. We are one of 3 communities that feed into Crafton, so we only have a 1/3 say, if that. So I encourage every single person to not only attend the council meetings, but attend school board meetings and ask them the same questions they're asking us, because we can't speak for them or think for them, so.
So can I move forward? Are you good? All right. So, last item is long-range project funding. Mr. Crown, you said you want to pass on that tonight?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass because it was part of the rec plan and kind of played in with Coletta was saying. So let's just kick that can down the road for a meeting or two until we start to look and see where we're at.
Okay. All right, sounds good. All right, community announcements. I'll spare you unless you want, do you want to?
No, feel free, thank you.
No. All right. Community announcements. Deadline for seasonal employment applications is Friday, March 13th by 4 p.m. Applications must be submitted to the Borough office. Representative Deasy's office staff will be in the community center March 21st from 3:30 to 5 p.m. to assist in securing PWC Connect cards right before the first senior dinner of the year. Please RSVP for the dinner by March 17th, and all remaining dinner dates can be found online. A Firecracker 5K committee meeting will be held on March 25th at 7 p.m. in the community center. Crafton Celebrates will host a murder mystery dinner fundraiser at the American Legion on April 18th, 2020. The tickets are $30 each and $50 per couple, and that's running under the rec board, from what I understand. Crafton Celebrates.
I'm not quite sure how that works. I'm trying to figure that out.
Okay. A shred event will be held on May 9th at the Crafton Park. More information to follow. Oh, sorry. At the Sea Club is not just, the Crafton Volunteer Fire Department will host their annual night at the races on May 2nd, 2020. Contact the Crafton Volunteer Fire Department for more information. And I saw that the digital board out front is advertising that as well. Looks good.
I just have one quick comment. The seasonal employment applications
Mhm.
are very thin. So if you know somebody looking for a job, lifeguard or whatever, like everyone else, I think we're gonna be in a position where we're gonna be looking for people, like Burger King and KFC and everybody else that owns a business right now. So please get the word out if you know somebody looking for a job. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you,
Are we
ma'am.
in danger of not opening the pool?
Uh,
I just know there's, we haven't had.
Any additional citizen comments for this evening?
Motion to adjourn.
Seeing none,
Motion to adjourn.
all right, meeting adjourned, thank you.